Hello, my friend. Thank you very much for watching. I am Michael, and the topic of the day is, will camera gear make you a better wildlife photographer? We'll be answering that question and delving a little bit deeper into understanding what gear will and will not do for you. And to help me, I've brought along the most experienced wildlife photographer I know. He's been a professional photographer for over 20 years and doing wildlife since 2006. I've learned so much from him, my good friend, Ray Hennessy. Thank you so much for joining.
How's it going, man? Thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to diving into this topic. I know this is one that I get asked all the time and just hear other people talking about all the time. And I think there's some great info out there and some not so great info. So I think there's a lot of stuff to talk about here.
Ray, will camera gear make you a better wildlife photographer?
Well, it's obvious. Yes and no.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I don't think there is a set answer to that. I think there are things that it will, and there are things that it won't necessarily. So
Yeah,
some misconceptions maybe
I think
about
so too.
when and what that gear will do for you.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of people will adamantly say like, no, it will not. And I get that from the perspective that like the photographer is you, and
Yes.
it's all about what's in your head and what your eyes can see and all that stuff. And obviously, there's so much like field craft and everything that goes into it as well. But nonetheless, gear can make a big difference. So I guess the big pitfall is if you think that like I don't like my shots, I don't like my subjects, I don't like the lighting, I don't like the way I'm framing stuff, I'm gonna buy a new camera and everything will be better. That's not the solution.
Correct. When is it time to upgrade?
Mm,
And that is when you can really fully understand and be very clear about the differences. A lot of people I say, they'll ask me, the students I work with, oh, do you think I should get this? Do you think I should get that? All right, why do you want it? What are you going to
yeah,
get out of it?
yeah.
Well, it'll be, I think it'll be better in this way, or it might be better this way, right?
Mm,
Like they're kind of unsure.
yeah.
I think once you've mastered the craft and the field craft
Mm,
enough that you are able to very clearly articulate,
yes.
this is my problem. This piece of gear can help because of these reasons and become a solution.
Yeah.
Now it's time to upgrade. When you
Yeah.
can very clearly define that. If it's all vague and just, I want my photos to be better and not in a specific way, that's where I think people get themselves not into trouble necessarily,
Mm-mm.
but just into potentially wasting money, or moving up before they're even ready and then not realizing the advantages of that gear.
Yeah, I think that's extremely good point. And I mean, I think both of us, I think everybody has seen plenty of examples of like horrible images, horrible image quality, like horrible framing, horrible exposure, and everything. And you look at the gear, like, wow, this person is shooting with like like the 600
Top
millimeter
of the line.
f4,
Yeah.
the newest version, and the D6 or something like that. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
how is that
Yep.
even possible?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's no. So yeah. And then I think another good point, which is maybe a little bit beside the topic here, but something that I've realized myself, and I've heard you say, and a bunch of your guests on the podcast also kind of seems to be a recurring topic, is that before you can get before you can really you need to understand your gear so well, settings and all that stuff so well, to the point where you can free yourself from thinking about that, so you can actually start seeing what's out there and start framing
Yes.
and thinking about backgrounds and all that stuff. And I remember that myself. I mean, I still get confused now and then, but that was a big thing for me, is when I could actually, like, I spent the first couple of years being like,
Yeah.
like constantly,
Yep.
and coming
I think
home
we all
with,
do.
yeah, and coming home with horrible photos and stuff, and being like, wow, I can't believe it. I didn't even think to notice that background was super messy and horrible and stuff. And now
Yes.
background is like probably one of the main things I even think about right away. I think that the mirrorless cameras are making that a bit easier, in the sense that with the DSLRs, you don't really know what you're shooting till you kind of look on the
Yes.
back of it, unless you really, then you have to be really, really comfortable with everything. And with the mirrorless cameras, it's harder to mess up, in the sense that you can kind of see your exposure and be like, oh my God, what am I doing here?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. It is very convenient in that regard.
But
Yeah.
also, I mean, that's also, I guess, a way that gear can hold you back, is if from achieving your fullest, is if if it's getting in the way
Yeah.
of your photography, because you're like, I don't understand this thing, and why isn't it focusing, and so on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
You go ahead.
I was going to say, and I think that's a reason why all of the top line professional full-time wildlife sports photographers, you don't see them generally shooting with, a 200 to 600 millimeter lens or a 150 to 600 millimeter lens
Yeah.
zoom like that.
Yeah.
And again, I am always careful to tell people when they ask me, what lens should I get? That's usually the biggest question, is that people ask more about lenses with wildlife than
Yeah.
cameras.
Yeah.
Um, it's not to say that you cannot take great, amazing photos with any lens out there. That is not to say the case. That is not true, is what I mean to say.
Yeah.
But the ease of which you can do it, the consistency of which you can do it,
Yeah.
those numbers, those percentages change. The super zoom lenses tend to kind of go lower, whereas the really fast prime lenses tend to increase. So your percentage of keepers is up here, and your percentage of keepers is down here with those zoom lenses, and your frustration goes the other way. The frustration is
100%.
way up here with these other lenses. And I've had 3 students within the past year that were just, they'd send me photos for critique, and over again, it's like, I'm sorry, but it's not sharp. It's not sharp. It's not
Yeah.
sharp. Like
No, I
it's
agree.
not sharp,
Yeah.
and they just go, oh, I don't know. And I'm just like, I think you're at the point right now where it's time to invest in a new lens. And I guide them a little bit, but it's still their decision, because there is no perfect lens for everybody, which I know we'll talk about. But they get a new lens. And I know both of these photographers are using the lens you have sitting right there, that 500 PF from Nikon. And the consistency and quality of those photos it just shot up just from that. Nothing else changed. They put that good gear on their lens, and then boom.
Yeah, and you touched upon something there also. It depends on, how serious. Maybe that sounds wrong. How much time are you putting into this, and what do you want to do with it? Because if you're happy just go for a walk on Sunday down by the dike, and you want to just snap a few shots and stuff like that, then it would be completely insane to buy a 500 millimeter f4. Like, why would you spend that kind of money on it and put that kind of stress on your body? Because that stuff is heavy too. It would be crazy. But if you're out there, any chance you get, and you're putting in tons and tons of time scouting and waiting for that nanosecond where the thing happens, then all of a sudden it does become important that you have the edge. Then it makes a difference that you can stay out an hour longer taking photos, because that's when the animal comes out. Or it makes a difference that your camera will actually focus that second where you need it to, and so on. So what are you shooting with now?
Yeah, definitely. I have 2 setups. This is the nice, convenient, lightweight setup right here. This is the Nikon Z6 II, Nikon 300 millimeter f4 PF. I almost always have the 1.4 teleconverter in it. The setup is just tack sharp. The teleconverter slows the focus down a little bit, but nothing too major. So this is my go-to kind of, walk around, portable, lightweight setup. And I use this almost exclusively when I'm working. So, when I have a client with me, because their photography is first, not mine. So that tends to be the setup there. And then the other setup, which is similarly sized, is the 500 f4, and the D4S is still mounted on that. I'm shooting the Z6 II a lot more lately, but I still find for action, and if I know I'm going to be shooting birds in flight or anything like that, that the D4S still just performs a little bit better there for me. But both cameras amazing in low light, and what blew my mind is that Z6 II is actually better in low light than the D4S, which I was not expecting. I was expecting equal, but not better.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And I think anyone who makes the transition and who appreciates, performance in low light, I've heard them say the same thing. And also on paper, if compared to the D5, even, or the D4S and so on, it outperforms it. And when I said that on a review I did, like, I got some hateful comments where people were just basically saying I was a complete moron for stating that. I was like, try it. It's crazy. That is my setup right now is also, I'm shooting almost exclusively with the Z6 II.
Nice.
I do still have my D850. It's pretty beat up, like gooey glue up here, and yeah, it's been through the
Still
ringer.
gets the job done.
It does, and yeah, I would say if I know I'm doing birds and flight or fast stuff, then I'll probably take this one. It's a bit more consistent in that sense, and then because it has the more megapixels. You know, if it's something where I know it's going to be extra far away, I'll get some more reach out of this thing here. But
Yeah.
now that I'm used to the live view or seeing the actual exposure
Yeah.
in camera here, it feels pretty Stone Age to go back to that thing where you're constantly checking on the back there. And then also the silent shutter here. I've been shooting great crested grebes and ducks lately, and it's just so awesome that they
Such a
can hear
dream.
you.
Yep.
Oh, I've been shooting some extremely skittish Eurasian jays, and those I think probably the most skittish birds I've ever shot. It's crazy. If I move inside the hide without making a sound, they fly away. It's
Wow.
completely uncanny. So any shutter sound, it would be impossible. And then I got the 400 millimeter f2.8.
Nice.
And the converter is almost always on there for the most part, because then I got a 564 f4, and you cannot tell the difference.
I'm sure.
Compared to an f4. I mean, when I'm doing it just with the without the converter at f2.8, this thing is just a monster. It's so fast. It's ridiculous. So in that way, it slows it down a little bit, but it performs on par with the 500 f4 I had before. And then just being able to go down to f2.8 for me, or up to that, is a big advantage, in low light. And then what I do like about this lens is it does perform well with converters. So it does also perform quite well with the 2x going to 200 to 800, but it does get a tad soft.
Gotcha.
But yeah, quite a very versatile lens, heavy. Monster, ridiculous, but still.
Yes.
And then the other thing I use is the 500 PF,
which is on my wish list.
It's an awesome lens. I will say that it's slow compared to the f4, the f2.8.
Yep.
So I was trying to shoot some long-tailed tits the other day, and they sit still for like 3 seconds, and that was difficult with this one. So in that moment, I definitely wished I had the other lens. But for hiking and stuff, this thing is absolutely amazing. And if you do want like a proper prime on a budget, this thing is great. I mean, the image quality is insane. The biggest problem for me, and just so lightweight, is such a pleasure compared to the other ones. But the biggest issue for me with this one probably is not even the slow focusing compared to the other one. It's just the fact that it's f5.6, and that to me is in many cases just a big handicap. Is there an ultimate wildlife lens? It's like, is there one lens that's like the lens?
Yeah, you're right. I see that so much online, forums and
people get angry at each other.
Yeah, they're like, this one's so much better. And it's such a personal choice with your goals, your intentions, how you like to shoot, where you like to shoot, what you like to shoot. So for me, the answer is absolutely, without question, no. There is no perfect lens for anything. Some great examples. I have the 500 f4. That is my go-to lens if I'm shooting for me 90% of the time. But there's one location I go to. It's a jetty that I photograph some sea ducks at sometimes, harlequin ducks, long-tailed ducks, this year some common eiders and stuff like that. And to walk around that jetty is dangerous without anything. So to be carrying around something this heavy is also just cumbersome and a pain.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, with most waterfowl, I'm always trying to photograph them at water level.
Yeah.
And to get that to happen at this place often requires like laying on rocks, leaning over them, holding the gear down, like hovering it over, So just a near impossibility with that heavy rig. And so when I go to that location, even though that lens in all intents and purposes for me is better than this 300 PF, this is the setup that's going with me. Because it gives me that flexibility to A, safely move around, and B, get in the perspectives that I want to make that shot happen. And I'm sacrificing 80 millimeters of reach. I'm sacrificing an f-stop of light, and I'm sacrificing speed of focus as well. But those sacrifices are outweighed by the like the perspective
Yeah.
and the angles and the opportunities I'm able to get by using this.
Yeah.
And then bonus with the mirrorless, the flip out LCD now is a massive help
Yeah.
because I've gotten shots that I can 100% say this year that I would not have been able to get even with the small lens setup and my D4S, because I was literally hanging over rocks, hanging this down, looking at this,
Yeah.
and playing chicken with the waves,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
watching the waves come in and try not to get the gear
Yeah.
wet. But I got completely water level perspective
Yeah.
shots of these ducks. So, even though I have better gear, this is the right choice for the job.
Yeah.
So it really depends on what you're after and what your targets are and what your goals are.
Yeah, this summer I was out spending quite a bit of time in like inflatable rubber boats, shooting llamas and
Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
And yeah, dangling the big 500 millimeter over the side there is also just like it's stressful because you're like,
Yeah.
well, like it really doesn't take much for me to drop this thing because it's and with the little PF there's it's not much of a liability, and
Yeah.
also you gotta if you're compensating for the waves and everything, it's just so much
Anything. Yeah.
more handy and stuff. And I like when I was out with Kevin, he had a little motor on there, so that was fine. But when I didn't have that, so I was like trying to row,
Paddling around. Yeah.
rowing like a rubber boat and stuff. And yeah, I needed a light setup for that. So I think that's an excellent point for sure. And like if you're hiking in the mountains and stuff, carrying and like 20 pounds of gear is crazy.
Yeah, and so I also want to say the same thing about camera bodies too.
Yeah.
There is no one great camera body for
Yeah.
every photographer for every situation.
Yeah.
So for me, again, I tell everybody that asks me this, what are your priorities? Figure out your priorities.
Yes.
And, the blanket thing I tell everybody is go rent the gear. Don't listen to anybody to tell you what is best for you because they don't know. But obviously you want to listen to and pay attention and thoroughly watch videos like ours right now. But take these suggestions and opinions into consideration, but apply your own unique perspective and goals
Yeah.
to upgrade decision. Because for me, low light is king. I shoot low light way more than I ever need to reach. I have zero need for a high megapixel camera because all that's going to do for me is slow down my post processing, make everything just take up more space on the files, on the computer, on the camera, and not be as good in low light. And I shoot low light more. I don't find myself in many scenarios where I would benefit from the added megapixel resolution. But that doesn't mean others that do are wrong.
No, I agree, but I also find myself rarely in situations where I really need as many frames per second as humanly possible.
Exactly.
So yeah, there seems to be like a lot of focus on as many frames per second and as many megapixels, but yeah, I mean, for me, it's more about image quality, I would say, yeah, I mean, the Z6, the files are just absolutely beautiful, and it performs so well in low light. And yeah, I also find myself in low light quite often, and I'm always trying to push my ISO as low as possible. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
I just get as clean shots as possible.
Sure.
And also just get it to look as good as possible. But it's people are really passionate about it. I think it's a practical aspect, and I think I like to watch reviews that are practical. I try to do practical reviews myself too, because I can read about all the specs somewhere else and
sure
see example shots. So I think one of the interesting things is to get other photographers kind of practical experience with it. That I think is most helpful. And then second to that, doing getting out there and trying it yourself. But it's interesting because also with the whole mirrorless thing, it's I've done a couple of reviews also where it's just like some people just lost their minds on me. Where you're like, hey man, if you're
welcome to the internet.
Yeah, if you spend if you only shoot at midday in like full like insane light, so you can go to like 6,000 of a second, and you're only shooting high speed action, of course the D500 is going to make you more happy than the Z6, and that's absolutely goddamn fine. Like I have a different style, so I think that's really, 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 really important point is like find out what your style is, what are your priorities, and what are your subjects, what are you shooting. Yeah, so I think going back to the point you had before is like I think it's really cool that you ask your students those questions, because yeah, I think that is probably key, is when you have a clear answer to why, um, what practical aspect of your photography will be solved by upgrading. I think that's a really good guideline.
And a great way to combine these two things that we were just talking about are, if you what can happen if you upgrade prematurely and you don't have your own style and goals either defined yet or clearly laid out in your head, and B, you don't know the technical limitations of what your current gear has and what those benefits will be from upgrading. You could find yourself upgrading in a direction that's not the best fit for you.
Yeah.
you know so if you are a photographer that likes to shoot mostly birds in flight in stronger sunlight, um, low light's not as big an issue. If your goals are to simply capture as best action shots as you can and your subjects tend to be farther away, well, guess what, maybe a longer reach
Yeah.
lens with a higher megapixel camera that has a fast frame rate is going to be the best fit for you. Well, until you've defined those goals, well, what happens if you listen to somebody else that said, "Oh, you need this because it's better low light"? Well, maybe that's not going to help you out that much.
Yeah.
So you're going to end up wasting money heading in a direction that isn't the best fit for you because you don't have those goals defined yet. Once you have those goals defined, then you can say to yourself, you know what? I really like to shoot this species and it's in the dark all the time. And, I'm missing focus all the time. So these are my priorities. This is going to be the best gear that is going to get me in that direction and help me improve.
I think you said it perfectly there, and that's like basically also the perfect kind of note to round off with here.
Yeah.
That was great advice, and it was really interesting talking to you about it. And yeah, it's, people are passionate about this stuff, and we all have different opinions, and yeah, just like you said, I think summarizing it is just, you just got to find out what works for you, and move in that direction, and then take it slow. Like, maybe spend more time understanding your gear rather than upgrading, and then yeah, going back to the first question, like, if you feel like you're not, getting the right subjects, and you feel like your framing is not right or whatever, all that stuff, then you're not going to magically solve that getting the most expensive gear in the world. Then you need to work on your photography craft itself. And I think that's actually also kind of a beautiful thing with photography, because we have all this fancy gear and stuff we can get, but it doesn't really solve the fundamental stuff. I mean, that is exactly the same as it was 50 years ago, in the sense that you got to
Yes.
understand light, and you got to get the field craft down, you got to understand framing and all that stuff, to really, you really progress and get to the next level, for sure.
Such a perfect point, man. I love that you said that. Yeah, I think that really is so important, and I think so often overlooked. This camera that is amazing in low light and can guess the exposure perfectly and can track the subject throughout the frame, it cannot decide my perspective. It
Yeah.
cannot decide my foreground, my background, the direction that the light is hitting my subject. It cannot know anything about what I'm photographing and when that animal does what it does, anticipate behavior. None of that stuff this technology can help. All that can help that is your skill, your practice, and your field craft. So yeah,
Yeah, no, for
can't
sure.
emphasize can't emphasize that enough.
Amen. Awesome. Well,
That was fun.
it was. Thank you so much, Ray, and thank you for watching. I hope these tips helped. If you have any questions, please, write them in the comments. We'd love to have a conversation. And yeah, if there's any other points you'd like to add, yeah, just throw that into a comment. So thank you very much, and see you next time. I'm gonna do that one over.
Yep, no problem. Yeah, we just hit a dead end there. Yeah, yeah, no problem at all.